All right, then that's what we leave on just for now, but I'm going to head over now to the Money Desk where Devin is standing by. Devin, a new report on gender equality here saying that we still have a very long way to go.
Yes, indeed, and it's coming out from the World Economic Forum, and what it basically says is that if you look at some of the indices on gender equality or inequality, we're still way behind in that particular instance. The World Economic Forum releasing a report earlier in the day. And South Africa, by the way, up 2 places from last year. We were hoping to get some remark on how specifically Africa and South Africa does from the World Economic Forum. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, just very quickly, it's lunchtime, take a quick look at the indicators and find out what's happening with the JSE. The local market is rallying with the all share about 800 points to the good. From Friday's close, you can see the all share 1.2% in the green. It's taking its lead from positive Asian markets as investors continue to welcome positive developments in the US-China trade war. Sasol is up a whopping 9%, by the way, as the oil price gains. If we take a look at the rand, it's also maintaining its resilience against the US dollar. And again, it's the optimism over that interim trade deal between Washington and Beijing. 14 rand 39 to get yourself a dollar, 16 rand 5 cents for a euro. A British pound sitting at 18 rand 98 cents. So you're pretty good against the British pound at the moment. Now, as we were saying, complete global gender equality is almost 100 years away. That's according to the latest World Economic Forum's annual Global Gender Gap Report. It ranked Iceland as the most gender-equal country for the 11th consecutive year, followed by its Nordic neighbours Norway, Finland and Sweden. Countries like Syria, Pakistan, Iraq and Yemen have been ranked the lowest. So what did the report do? It analysed 153 countries and its progress towards gender parity. It focused on 4 main themes: economic participation, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. By the way, as we said, South Africa moving up 2 places from 17th in the rankings. All right, so joining us from Geneva now via Skype is at the World Economic Forum is the forum's Roberto Crotti. Just for more information on that, Roberto, thanks indeed for joining us. 100 years or thereabout for the lives of women to reach complete equality to men. That's an uncomfortably long time, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. We have found that despite improvement, there has been some improvement, especially in one of the dimensions that we measure, political empowerment. However, there is still stagnation when it comes to economic opportunities, which leads to an incredibly long time still to close the gender gap completely.
And the world over, it's interesting to see that women's health and survival are improving. But that's very basic, though, isn't it, Roberto? I would imagine that economic participation, that's the worrying side, because we've actually seen a regressing on that front, haven't we?
Yes, indeed. There is still much to do on the economic front, as much also on the political empowerment, despite the improvement this year. But there are still very wide gaps to fill in both the economic participation and the political empowerment aspects. Especially this year, we noticed that women participate less in the labor market compared to the past, and also wage differential are still completely stagnating. There is no progress on that front.
I just want to bring it down to Africa. It's good to see Rwanda in the top 10. That's the global top 10. It's in fact way ahead of South Africa. What are they doing differently in terms of women emancipation?
I would mention a few things. First of all, they created an environment such that almost 80% of women, adult women, go to work. So they create an environment where women are incentivized to participate. And at the same time, also in politics, they already achieved parity when it comes to women in ministerial position and in parliament. And at the same time, they are improving also education. Of course, there is still a lot of gaps to fill there, but they're making the right moves.
So South Africa is an interesting case because we do reasonably well in terms of political participation. We just need to look at our parliament to sort of get a sense of that. But again, you look at wage inequality in South Africa and again, economic participation. That still remains a problem here down south on the continent, doesn't it?
Yes, these are indeed the two main weaknesses in South Africa's performance. Women are not participating in the labor force as much as they do in other countries, even in the region. And wage gaps are still quite large, larger than some of the neighbors, for instance.
Yeah, and I suppose just to round off there, Roberto, you can understand the vigor when it comes to the strikes, the protests, and a very big campaign to actually get women issues off the ground, particularly on the economic front from South Africa. You think that might go a long way to change things faster than it would ordinarily do?
In the future, depending on how these prospects will change, we can see a faster catch-up towards gender parity, and certainly the cultural movement that they try to break away from silos and having the society accepting women taking higher roles, both in the companies and politically, can definitely help.
Well, thanks very much indeed. From the World Economic Forum in Geneva, Roberto Crotti there from the WEF. And there you have it, Tumelo.
Shocking numbers there indeed. 100 years to wait till there's equality between men and women. It is really uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's if the pace remains the same. I mean, obviously, what we want to do is up the policy, up the campaigning, and get something off the ground.
All right, then. We'll have to wait and see on that, David. But you know what?